Well, let's pray. Thanks, Lord, for this opportunity to be together. And we pray for those who aren't here that whatever the case may be, that you keep them safe and help them to be well. We pray for the time that we have to spend this evening, that you would bless our efforts and give us understanding. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen. So what I thought would be just to see where you're at. Can you write out, do you think you could write out the alphabet? Does that seem realistic?
Without looking?
No.
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
Not yet. Are you repeating it to yourself at times? I mean, you find yourself...
Move closer.
Okay.
Just so you get, I'm hearing impaired.
Okay.
So for that reason, I always sit close.
Is that
Your voice is not a booming one.
No, it's not. I remember years ago I got one of those mics that was like this for preaching. And I was telling my sister about it, who's 2 years older than me. And she says, well, it seems to me to be a whole lot easier to just learn how to speak up.
That's sisterly advice.
That was sisterly advice.
Like only a sister can.
Yeah. Anyway, okay, so practice. I mean, just sit down when you got 5 minutes or 10 minutes and practice writing when you're driving in the car. Repeat the alphabet. Just try over and over again so that it becomes natural, because you know, there's no classroom work that's going to accomplish that. It's going to have to be you working at it, but it'll give you good dividends when you're trying to look up a word later on.
Yeah, I don't find pronouncing the alphabet did me any good. I mean, that was what I started with. And then I realized it's the characters that matter, not being able to say the character, just being able to recognize it.
Well, for instance, if I'm looking up a word in my lexicon, and I see that the word here, and I can pronounce it, and it says aphistome. Okay, if I pronounce it correctly, then I know it starts with alpha, and then it's going to be phi after that, and then iota after that, because I've pronounced it. So it helps me. I don't have to go, okay, alpha, and then phi. You know what I'm saying? It's just, if you can pronounce it correctly, pronounce the words correctly, and we'll practice pronouncing the words, because it just facilitates looking words up so much more easily. Does that make sense?
No,
Oh.
not to me. I have to know what in order to know the word, I have to know the sounds of the characters.
Right.
And that's what I'm missing.
The sounds of the characters.
Repeating alpha, beta, gamma, delta, epsilon.
You need to look at it while you say
Yeah.
it.
Oh.
I'm doing it while I'm painting the house, which is what I'm doing this week.
Uh-huh.
That didn't do me any good.
Oh.
So you need to be painting it on the side of your
Yeah,
house.
I need to be painting the letters on the wall. but
Okay.
My wife might not agree with that.
Well, I'd suggest you do them both. You know, practice writing it, practice saying it. It will help. I can guarantee you, because looking up a word, if you can pronounce the word correctly, it makes it so much
The
easier.
worksheet was worth its weight in gold.
Good.
If we had 10 more of those,
Right. Well, we got one next.
those would be valuable.
Did any of you? I saw you on the
Facebook.
Facebook. You said, did you get on Facebook?
Two of my devices said couldn't get me, so I have to get on a computer, see if I can get on that.
Okay, because
I did not. I haven't gone all week.
okay,
So I didn't.
I'm going to communicate some stuff. I actually wrote out a sentence that's in that same kind of stuff just for fun. The exercise in worksheet 2 that you'll take home and do this time has an entire story. And then they're going to ask you questions at the end of the stories to see if you've comprehended.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And they're even going to slip one Greek word in there.
In the questions.
No, in the text.
So then we have to go look that one up.
Well, yeah, you'll figure it out because it won't make sense in English. So,
Okay.
but it's a very common word. Anyway, so just to review, let's look at page 16. Just review those diphthongs.
See, I didn't even get to those. I've been going over the basics so much that,
Well, some of those exercises in the worksheet were based.
yeah, the worksheets I did, but I mean, just really going over this, I haven't
Yeah.
yet.
So the I, the alpha iota, that's pretty much like English AI. So that's pretty easy. The alpha upsilon, owl, kraut in English is similar to that. Well, I guess that's German. But and then epsilon iota, A, that's very similar to English. U, that generally we say like pneumonia. That's another Greek word too. But it would be new in Greek. We would say new. Actually, in Greek you'd say pneumonia, but because they don't have any silent letters. But there's several. By the way, there's several English words that start with EU, eulogy, euphemism. Those are all Greek, and "eu" in Greek means good. It's a word. So good eulogy, good word. Euphemism, good. Yeah, what's the Greek word there? Anyway, oi, that's like English. Oo, that's like English. And then we don't have that UI in English. So those are close to English. And that's one of the things that's nice about studying Greek is the vocabulary has a lot of similarities to English. Whereas Hebrew, there's none. There's just none. The only Hebrew word that most people know is hallelujah, and that's about it. So,
Can I ask a question about
Yes,
these
please.
diphthongs? Some of them make the same sound as single characters, correct?
which one are you thinking of?
Well, freight, I mean the A sound as in freight.
Oh, as in Ada, that would be the same as
Yeah, it
Ada.
would be the same as Ada.
Correct.
And then the U sound as in feud is the same as the...
Is that what he says?
The upsilon
Yeah, that's
is
more.
new, he gives the pronounced as in new, which sounds a whole lot
Feud.
like feud. It's the same sound to me. So, is there...
I always pronounce upsilon as oo.
Ooh,
Yeah.
okay.
He says the German upsilon with a umlaut over it, which would be ü, which is not anything like it. So anyway, yeah.
Okay.
So there are some similarities, and in those cases, even if you pronounce the word right, you might not exactly be able to look it up by the sound of it. But that's one of the things that's nice about Greek is that the sounds are consistent, pretty much, way different than English. So I wanted to just because we're going to jump into the parts of speech now, okay? We'll continue to review on the worksheet, like I said, to practice pronouncing and that sort of thing. But we need to keep moving ahead. And I don't know if we're going to complete one chapter each week. There gets some pretty long chapters here. They're like 12 or 13 pages, and I don't want to push this too hard. But this particular chapter is on parts of speech. And I really learned the English language when I started taking Greek, because you have to learn parts of speech. And I don't know how many languages you've taken, because usually in taking a language you learn your own language better. Have you found that to be true?
Oh,
Yeah. I just took Spanish 2 years ago. I took two quarters of Spanish at the community college, and because I was planning on going to Panama, but it didn't pan out. So anyway, and then I took German and taught German actually back in my college days. So I've had a little experience with foreign languages, and I frankly love them. But when I was taking Spanish, I wasn't really focused on parts of speech because we were just trying to talk Spanish from the first day of class. And we're not trying to talk Greek when we're taking Greek. We want to dig in and understand the detail. And I wanted to just give you a couple of ideas of why I think it's important to look at detail. And one of those is we don't have, I was just looking to see if anybody has a Bible. Maybe you have one on your phone or something, I don't know. But there's a verse in Galatians 3, 3:15. The Apostle Paul is making a point. Let's see if we can find it. Galatians 3:15. Verse 16, actually. Now the promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed. He does not say, and to seeds, as referring to many, but rather to one, and to your seed, that is Christ. So here's a big deal that Paul is making about the difference between singular and plural. You know, and people, because I've taught hermeneutics, how to interpret the Bible, I know that there are people who will say, well, why do you need to look at all this detail? And I'm convinced that every word of Scripture is inspired by God. Jesus said, not one jot or tittle will pass from the law until it's all fulfilled. In Hebrew, most people don't know what a jot or a tittle is, but so here's a line and here's a yod, which is what they meant when they said jot in the King James Bible. And so that's the smallest letter in the Hebrew Bible is the yod. And so that's what jot means in the King James when it says not one jot or tittle will pass from the law. Are you familiar with that verse? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's Jesus said, not the smallest letter. And then, so for instance, this is a bait in Hebrew, and this is a kaf in Hebrew. Okay? So this is the difference between the two. That is a tittle. So it would be similar, perhaps, to a capital O and a capital Q.
Right.
You know, so it's a whole different letter. It's not like dotting the I, but it could be like crossing the T. You know, because that would be the difference between an L and a T, lowercase. So anyway, that's...
See, you've been in Greek so long, you don't see the sigma, omicron, rho similarity. To you, they're very different. But for us, just glancing at them, they're all O's with a
tail.
with a slight variation.
The rho and the omicron seem close?
Rho, omicron, and sigma.
Well, a rho is more like a P.
Okay, but it's not.
With the tail.
By U.S. standards, that's a very small, or by English standards, that's a very tiny tail.
Is that what it looks like on here too? I guess maybe.
Yeah, that's the type of stuff that kind of floored me as I was looking at other options.
Okay.
Some, it just was like a hesitation before they made their circle.
Yeah.
In other charts they had.
Well, thank you for saying that because yes, you were exactly right. I don't see it.
Well, look in the book. I've been using what's in the book,
Uh-huh.
and it's,
A much smaller tail?
well,
It's tiny.
look at the tail on row. It's quite minuscule.
Oh, yeah. Well, look in this text here.
Yeah, I know, it's different.
Yeah, so
They used a different font, a different Greek font.
yeah, I like this font a whole lot better. It's a lot.
Well, I need to make myself up on, I need to use the Greek font on my computer and print it out.
Yeah.
And
Were you seeing the same thing?
Well, I was used to row having a more like the lowercase p than what it was shown in here,
Have
so.
you studied some Greek before?
No, it's all in the math.
Oh, in the math, okay.
Yes.
But even the sigma on this chart in the book
You turn the row
is a
sideways.
very small
Yeah.
tail on it.
I just don't like that font.
But that's what we were introduced to.
I know, that's what he uses throughout this book.
And by the way, that's also what's in the worksheets.
Right,
The worksheet also uses that font.
yes, throughout the book. This was copied probably from
Yeah,
text. So, I apologize for that. Back in the day, this was probably typed on an IBM Selectric.
yeah, it's old.
Yes. You know, and I used to have, when I was teaching Greek, I had a Greek ball. You know, and I used to make up quizzes and stuff like that. Switching the, did any of you use an IBM
Oh, yes.
Selectric?
That was
No,
so
I've seen
cool.
it.
You've seen them, huh?
I've seen it.
I mean, on this page, look at the theta, like in verse 6 in the second word.
Right.
That theta is very distinctive. Now look at the theta in the table. It's,
So we need a new chart
we need a new table.
with
Look
this.
at the theta in that
this kind of
table,
a
it's
font.
pretty
Yeah,
subtle.
way different. Well,
So-
that's one of the reasons that I found this. I thought
Yeah.
this was a nice handwritten font.
Yeah, this draws row like a P.
Yes.
Where's a row on this? Yeah, and so does
It's-
this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So that was certainly part of my struggle this week, was I was using that table as that's the master.
I would be happy
Alphabet.
to volunteer to make a new table and print copies, because this is the kind of stuff that I do.
Okay.
I do book layout and stuff.
Documentation?
No, I do book layout and
Oh,
and things
oh.
like that. So I could, and I have a Mac with a ton, not just one Greek font in it, but several.
Oh, okay.
I've scrolled past them, there's several. So I
Okay.
could probably find a better font and make up a new version.
Yeah, anything that's close to
of
this.
their
This
table.
is my favorite font, and it's pretty close
Oh, that's
to
nice.
this.
Except for the point size,
Oh, yeah.
from this distance anyway.
For those of us in that age group, right?
Yes. Okay. So one more, I just,
So enough complaining.
No,
Now we
no.
Get down to work.
man, I really appreciate you saying that because it's important for me to have feedback. One more just point on detail, and this is from Jesus in Matthew 22. He's talking to the Sadducees about the resurrection. You remember that when they were challenging him about the resurrection?
What's the verse?
22:31. The Sadducees didn't believe in the resurrection. So he said to them, "But regarding the resurrection of the dead, have you not read what was spoken to you by God? Quote, I am the God of Abraham and the God of Jacob and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob. He is not the God of the dead, but of the living." And so Jesus was focusing on the present tense of the verb, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. That's the whole point of what he's saying. Not I was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because he's the God of the living. I still am the God of them because they're alive. So there's an illustration of the tense of the verb that is critical in what the author, or Jesus, is speaking. And so anyway, so that's my defense of getting technical, okay? Because we're going to look at parts of speech, right? So let's look at lesson 2:1. The parts of speech are not that different from English. I mean, a noun is a noun. There's a word that's used in this text, and it's this word. Substantive. Have that word?
No.
That's another word for a noun, or a word that's used as a noun. So you'll see, we're going to talk about a part of speech, and we'll say it's the substantival. It's the substantival use of a participle. So the participle is being used as a substantive. I'm sure you've heard of this word. Well, I think you probably have, adjectival.
Mhm.
So that's a word that's used like an adjective. So for instance, in one of the illustrations he uses in here, and he says, for instance, the poor boy poor is typically an adjective. No, poor is typically a noun.
It's
Can
typically
be
an adjective. It's a descriptor.
Yeah.
So if you talk about the poor,
Right, but that's what he's talking about, he's turning an adjective into a
Yeah.
noun by calling them the poor.
Yes, that's what I meant to do. Feed the poor. There we go. Now it's being used as a noun.
Right,
Right. Okay.
by having dropped the noun that's actually people.
So Greek, yes, Greek, yeah, the poor people, right. So Greek does that a lot. It changes, it takes adjectives and makes them into nouns. And we call that the substantival use. And he'll call that in this book that. So just so you're familiar with that word. The noun you can put right there beside noun equals substantive. That's what he uses. And he's not the only one. Greek grammarians do that. So one of the things that's true about all nouns is that they all have gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter. They all have number, singular or plural. And they all have case. Case will come in lesson, well, I think, is that lesson 3 or 4? I think case is in the next chapter. And then, yeah. So we won't talk about that right now.
Is he trying to be politically correct when he tries to remove masculine and feminine and just calls it class A and class B?
No. What he's trying to say is that masculine and feminine have nothing to do with male and female. It just so happens that the words that are used for male are all masculine in form. And all the words that are used for female, like wife and mother, they're all feminine in form.
But is it any different than Spanish or German or any other, most languages other than English that differentiate between?
No, it's no
Because
different.
those aren't afraid to say, yeah, this is the masculine, this is the feminine. He seems to be trying to dismiss it.
Yeah, I don't even think they had politically correct back in this
I didn't
day.
understand that.
this is like,
This is class A, class B.
Yeah, he's just trying to say that it just so happens, and I think he says it just happens to be that are words, German, die Fluss, the river is feminine, or Spanish, there's lots of illustrations of that. But Spanish has just masculine and feminine, there's no neuter, correct? And German's got neuter as well.
Right. Das Auto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, for instance, in the word for spirit, ruach, in Greek, is neuter. But that has nothing to do with, a lot of times people say, oh, it's neuter, that means it's it, not him, But we speak of the Spirit of God as a person, not an it, So, but it's neuter, but that doesn't mean that the Spirit of God is neuter. It's just that the word that's used for that, which is just the word for wind or spirit, is neuter. So, anyway, that's the point.
But it's no different than other languages
No.
in the world that have masculine, feminine, or different.
Right. So, Um, There's nothing masculine or feminine or neutered about them. But it's important, I mean, it's really important when you're doing a study to know what the gender, number, and case of a noun is. Adjectives, and this is where he has the example here, blessed are the poor. It's called the substantival use of the adjective, the last line in that fourth paragraph. So adjectives can be used as nouns. Now, infinitives, can you think of what an infinitive is in English?
Yes.
Yes, how do you recognize an infinitive in English?
We usually put the participle to.
Yeah,
To
you put the
be,
word
to
to.
swim,
Yep,
to throw.
right. So that's what we think of as an infinitive. A verb can become an infinitive. He says English manufactures nouns out of verbs by making gerunds. Well, I haven't heard much about gerunds since the third or fourth grade, I think. That by adding ing. So swimming is fun, so swimming becomes a noun in his illustration here. The Greek does this by using infinitives. To swim is fun, and that would be an English equivalent. When the Greek infinitive has an article, the, in front of it, think of it as a noun, the act of swimming. And I think that's helpful to mark that, the act of swimming. So infinitives have always kind of been a bugaboo to me in translating, but because they're used like nouns, and
But in Greek, do they just put the article and then the verb, or do they actually say the act of?
no, it would have an article.
They just put the article and then the verb.
Right, but the verb has a different ending. It has an infinitive ending on it, so you know it's an infinitive whether it has an article or not. It's an infinitive, and then whether it has the article or not would indicate to you how that infinitive is used in the sentence. So remember, you don't have to learn all this. Just kind of mark, it's in the margins, so you can go back to it if you need to. Pronouns are words that take the place of nouns. He, she, it. The Greek language comes equipped with a full roster of pronouns. Personal pronoun, possessive pronoun, reflexive pronoun, reciprocal pronoun. I don't know if we use those expressions in English or not, but there's a whole set of endings for those different pronouns. And perhaps we'll see that a little bit more a little later. Pronouns, do you know what the word antecedent means?
Something that goes before.
Well, yes, it would be. Let's see.
It's the noun that it refers to, which
Yes.
comes before the sentence.
It's the one it refers back to. I think it's an A there, antecedent. So if we're talking about what's the antecedent of the pronoun, it's the noun to which it refers. So pronouns have gender, number, and case, and must agree with the noun to which they refer in both number and gender, but not necessarily case. It depends upon where it's used in the sentence. So number and gender, this is called concord in that paragraph, if you see that.
This guy's teaching style is not very conducive to learning on the, he doesn't give any examples.
Oh, okay.
He tries to explain it all, and then he doesn't show any examples so that you can try to hook the knowledge to something. It appears he just wants you to memorize the rules.
Well, he doesn't want you to memorize the rules. He says don't try to memorize the rules, just learn where it is on the page so you go back and look at it when you need to. Because you're not going to translate, at least in this class we're not. Except individual words. So it agrees, I wrote out in the margin, agrees in number and gender, not in case of the antecedent. That's what I wrote in the margin of mine way back when. Or you can just underline it. So we have nouns, verbs, infinitives, adjectives are right here. Adjectives are words used to modify nouns or pronouns. The good boy, the beautiful house, the tall building. The Greek adjective is very much like the English one. Only the word order changes, generally. Usually the adjective will come after the noun. So the house white is the illustration it uses. Adjectives have gender, number, and case, which always agree with the nouns they modify. So that helps you know. Because word order is not like it is in English and Greek. And so sometimes a word will be placed at the beginning of the sentence because it wants to be emphasized. Or sometimes it's placed at the end of a sentence because it wants to be emphasized. And so you have to look at it and say, okay, what case is this? Is there a word that agrees? Many times there'll be an article and there'll be 2 or 3 different words and then a noun, and those are all adjectives explaining that one noun. You know, so
And yet they spoke that automatically.
yeah,
And when it came out in the right order in the
we would assume.
right cases. Okay.
Yeah. It would just be normal. I mean, when we hear somebody say something that just doesn't sound right, you know, they use a pronoun. I don't know if you do that, but if somebody says, he gave it to you and I, you know, boom, it's not you and I, it's you and me. He gave it to you and me, because I was always taught, take away the you and then it'll sound right or wrong to you. He gave it to I, it doesn't sound right. And besides that, my mother always corrected me, so I learned that. Participles. Participles, there's a lot of this. Participle, I wish I had, let me give you an illustration. I'll give you an illustration of a participle. Just to Matthew 28, 19 and 20. I think you're probably familiar with the Great Commission. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and Son and Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I commanded you. So, in this verse 19 and 20, there is a verb that is, I can't think of the word I want to use. It's the main verb of the sentence, and that is make disciples. That's the main verb of that sentence. That's the command. That's an imperative. It's in a form. It's called imperative, just like we would have a command. We'd say, go make. We don't say go, we just say make disciples, because we drop the you at the beginning when we say a command. Well, this has a different ending for everything. So make disciples, and then there's 3 participles that are dependent on that main verb. The first one is going. Matter of fact, this translation has a footnote, and it says, or having gone. It's an aorist participle, so it could be translated, having gone, therefore, make disciples of all the nations. And then there's 2 more participles, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And then the 3rd participle is teaching them. So going, baptizing, teaching are all participles. And the main verb is make disciples. So you don't see that in the English, but you see that in the Greek, and that helps you to understand what the command is.
So how would it read in Greek?
Well, you could...
Having gone, therefore, disciple all the nations.
Is that an
Which
interlinear there?
you just happen to have, not to get into a theological argument, but there's been centuries spent arguing the true meaning of that verse.
Well...
Is it go forth, or is it as you go?
Yeah, it could be either as you go, or
This-
having gone.
Well, having gone sounds like as you go, not go forth.
Right, because it's an aorist participle, so that means it, we'll talk about that in lesson 4, this is part of learning some Greek that will
Right.
be helpful. So we'll talk about it when we get a little further in. We'll talk about how to use an interlinear. We'll talk about how to parse verbs so that you can look and see, okay, that's an aorist passive participle. So what does that mean? And so that's why you'll be able to go back and look at some of these sections and say, remind me of what an aorist passive participle is supposed to be translated.
Well, it just brings up the whole missionary argument.
Oh, yeah,
Those
how
who
many-
believe
how
that you're not supposed to send people out, you're supposed to go as you go,
Yes.
rather than go forth.
Exactly.
Oh.
Yeah, so how many banners have you seen go?
Right.
Yeah, well, now, in Mark, chapter 16, it says go, and I don't know, it says go into all the world and preach the gospel is what it says.
Mhm.
So it's different than this command here.
But it even raises, is disciple a noun they've turned into a verb, or is disciple a verb that we've turned into a noun? Because doesn't it say, what's the word for disciple there?
Mathetes.
Yeah,
The word for disciple is mathetes, so this is mathetuata. So
so is there a way to tell if that's a verb?
if
It's
it
being
comes from a
used as
verb,
what's being used as a verb here.
yeah, you'll have many words in Greek that have a verbal form and a substantival form. So there'll be a noun and a verb, and they're the same words. For instance, you've probably heard of the word metaneo.
Mhm.
It's translated repent. Yeah, and so that's the verb, metaneo. The pronoun, the verb, the noun is, I can't think of it, but there's a noun that goes with
Well, I
it.
guess what I'm getting at is, in English, we tend to think of the word disciple as a noun.
Uh-huh.
Even though you might disciple someone,
Right,
we think of it as a noun that happens to be being used as a verb in
yeah,
that
to make
instance.
disciples, yeah.
In Greek, is that word, or do they view it that way, where that word is a noun being used as a verb, or is there a noun form and a verb form, and they don't?
Yeah, I don't know, I
Okay.
can't answer that question, but
I
it is,
don't want to get into translation.
Yeah.
That's-
but it is, but it does have a verbal form and a noun form, and so they have different endings. So anyway, that's an illustration, a practical illustration of understanding what participles are and how that helps you to understand a particular verse or verses in Scripture. And so I've found that very, very helpful. As a matter of fact, I could take it a little bit further. It says, if we were writing this in modern evangelicalism today, we would say, going into all the world, or as you go, make disciples, and lead them to faith in Christ, and then teach them everything I've taught you. And we wouldn't say baptize them.
That's a transliteration.
Well, it is a
Yeah.
transliteration for sure, but typically our focus is on getting people to make a decision for Christ. I mean, that's the focus of evangelicalism, but that's not here.
But through
It says-
example, not through teaching.
It says baptize them. So is there something about baptism that they knew that we don't know?
Hmm.
And I was preaching a sermon on this a couple of years ago, and I'm just convinced that baptism, I mean, look all the way through the New Testament, it was something that was done when people believed in Jesus. The Philippian jailer took Paul and Silas home, cleaned up their wounds, and then Paul baptized them.
The whole family.
The whole family, before morning. And then you have other peoples in evangelicalism who will say, well, you gotta let people be Christians for 6 months before you baptize them. Nothing about that in the Bible. Anyway, we can do deep dives, but right now we'll continue on here, because we got 40 minutes left. So adjectives, participles, that's where we are. So participle is a verb, which is, this is the bottom paragraph, verb turned adjective. A participle is a verb which has been converted to an adjective by adding an appropriate suffix to the verb stem. So here's an example. You can say the good word, ha agathos logos. Good is agathos.
Can you say that slower?
Ha agathos logos.
Okay. I'm trying to differentiate. I had an argument with my wife about alpha versus omicron,
Okay.
the actual sound.
Oh, it's not.
She says they're different. There's a difference between the
Is she
ah
Greek?
and father. No,
Oh, okay.
not at all. But she says there's a difference in the ah and father and whatever you call it in log, which were the examples.
Yeah.
She says those are different sounds. You just can't hear it because you're hearing impaired.
They're not much different.
Good.
Slightly different, yeah.
So that's where the name Agatha comes from. It means good.
Is that right?
I know. I'm
Sounds good.
guessing. It's.
Yeah.
How did you pronounce? Can you?
Agathos?
Ha. Agathos. Lagos.
Yeah. Yeah, so good agathos is the adjective. I may take the Greek verb, I write, grapho, and by adding the appropriate suffix, ace, which is a participial ending, it becomes graphes. And so, written. I make it a participle. I can then replace good with written, and the good word becomes the written word, ha graphes logos. So he's just showing how you can take a verb and put the proper ending on it, and it becomes a participle, and now it's an adjective. So Greek, that's part of the genius of Greek. As a matter of fact, he says somewhere in here that it's probably the one thing that stands out as unique among in the Greek language is the use of the participle. And a participle I find much easier, even though it's used so many different ways, I find it much easier than an infinitive.
So the word for write is grapho.
Yes,
Like graph.
graph,
Okay.
graphite.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And then adding the diphthong and the sigma, the ice,
Ace,
ace. Oh, that's right.
yeah.
Ace.
Just like the eta, same sound, like Lisa pointed out. So, sometimes they turn into an adverb up at the top of the next page. And I'm not going to go into that right now, and I'm not going to go into the periphrastic use right now, because that, we'll get into that later. The next paragraph, it says properties on the outside. The Greeks managed to introduce all the adjectival properties into their participle, including case, number, and gender, without losing the verbal ideas of voice and aspect. And we'll look at that in lesson 4. So, it's all about the endings. And you won't learn all the endings for sure, but at least you know where to look. I was just telling you this, in Greek, a very elaborate clause with many, many words can actually be nothing more than an adjective and fill a single adjective slot. And then participles can also be used as nouns. And here's an illustration in the bottom of the page here. The article plus the infinitive equals the action itself. So the word there is ta poiein, which is the act of making. So ta is a neuter article, just like ha. Ha is, that we saw on the other page, ha agathos. Ha is masculine, ta is neuter. Poiein is from the verb poieo, and so it has an infinitive ending on it. And so there with the article in front of an infinitive, it becomes the act of making. But if you take an article and put it in front of a participle, that participle, same verb, poieo, but it has a participle ending on it, participial ending. So you put the article in front of it, now it's the one who is making. So we'll see that in the text as we go. But that's about as helpful of a distinction between an infinitive and a participle. And again, here's another word that's used, an articular infinitive and an articular participle. That just means it has an article in front of it, okay? Articular. Speaking of articles, then we have another word that's used in Greek grammar, and it's anarthrous. So, articular means it's a word that has an article in front of it. And anarthrous in Greek, an A in front of a word does what? It makes it negative, right? Asexual. Okay? So if you and if the word happens to start with an with a vowel, then you put an N in between the A and the word. So this is a word, a Greek word, arthrous. It means it has an article. But this anarthrous makes it direct negative. It has no article. Can we think of an English word that adds an AN in front of it?
Any
That
that's
is
start with an L.
Huh?
And
Anti.
No, not
We
anti.
use for negative.
do you mean as a separate part, like
Anachronism?
Anachronism, there you go.
Okay.
Anachronism. So it's something out of time. Chronos is Greek for time. So anachronism, no,
That doesn't work?
no. Anna.
Antichrist?
Anna is another preposition. What?
Antichrist?
No.
No?
Yeah. Anyway, so those are a couple of words that are helpful. So in Greek, there's in English we have two articles. We have the and a or an. So one is called a definite article because the makes specific or definite, and the other is the indefinite article in English, which is just a bike, not the bike. The bike is a specific bike, a bike is just any bike, right? So one is a definite article, one is an indefinite article. Greek has only one article, and that's the definite article. So there's no indefinite article. There's no equivalent for a or an in English, in Greek, which has some interesting things. So for instance, in your book here, 1:6, or 1:9, where we have the Gospel of John here. Turn back to 1:9. So, NRK ein halagos, that's in the beginning was the Word. Kai halagos, and the Word, ein, was proston theon, with God. Okay? Actually it says with the God, but we just translate it as with God. And then we have, and here's where word order, we're at the beginning of the second line, right? Kai is and, theos is God, ein is was, and then ha logos is the word. But because logos, here's an example about word order, because logos has the article in front of it, it's the subject. And the word was God. It actually reads backwards. The word is the last two words, halagos. Ein is the word was, and theos is God. So if you were doing it with English, you would translate it in the normal word order, and you would say God was the Word. But that's not the message that it's giving, is that the Word was God. Now, there's no, notice just before that, we said, and the Word was with God, and it has ton theon at the end of the first line. You see that?
Mhm.
So it has an article in front of God. Okay? And there's reasons why there's an article. And then it says the Word was just theos at the end of that verse. But there's no article in front of it. If you were to look in a translation called the New World Translation, which is the one that the Jehovah's Witnesses have, their translation says, and the word was, a God.
I actually got into an argument with a Jehovah's Witness
Okay.
person about that one time.
And that's a possible translation when there is no article. Sometimes you need to supply the English indefinite article in order to understand the meaning of it. But when it comes to the name for God, when it's with the article, it's referring to somebody specific. When it's without the article, it's referring to his character. Okay? And so that's how that would be understood. And that's not just the best Greek grammarians and lexicographers would say that as well. So anyway, there's an illustration of God with an article and without an article in the same verse, a very familiar one to us. So John is so much fun to translate because it's like a primer in Greek. John is so easy. You know who the hardest one to translate is in the New Testament? It's Luke, which is not surprising since he was a physician. His Greek is much more difficult to translate. But the second most difficult is Peter, which just, I can't figure that out at all because he's just a fisherman, right? But he must have, maybe it was a Galilean accent or just, not an accent, but just something different. I don't know what it was, but I always have a hard time with Peter. Paul is not so hard, but Luke and Peter are the tough ones. Anyway, so where were we? We were talking about the article. Okay, so back on page 2.4. So this is really something that I recommend that you memorize, the article. This little table right here on page 2.4. Yeah. That's the article. That's every one of those words mean the. Okay? So ha, he, ta. And just, if you've had German, you know what nominative, genitive, dative, and accusative are. At least you have an idea of that. Greek also has 4 more cases: vocative, locative, instrumental, and ablative. But it has only 4 case forms. Some of them are very simple. I mean, some of them are exactly the same. Like genitive, plural are all tone, tone, tone. They're all exactly the same. So it gets a little easier. You notice that the nominative and the accusative and the neuter are the same, ta and ta for the feminine, singular, and ta for the plural. So anyway, this will be a big help to you in determining what the case of the noun is, because the article that goes before it will always match the adjective and the noun that follows it. So, who's it talking about? So, I'm not going to recommend that you memorize too much, but I think this one here is good, and so make some boxes and fill them in. Practice with that or something. Maybe I can make some for you next week, and you can do that. And then let's skip over to prepositions. Next page. Prepositions are words to show relationships between 2 objects, often spatial or time relationships. So it was helpful to use this kind of a drawing for a number of them. So for instance, so on the top here, peri, around. On the left side, pros, to. So we just translated that, and the word was with God. We translated it with, but it means a face-to-face relationship. That's what pros means, looking at somebody face-to-face. Apa, on the other side, on the right side, is away from. So pros, towards, apa, away from. And you can see the different ones. Ace is into, N, that's number 7. N is in, ek is away from. 3 pretty. It's interesting in the Gospel of John, every time that it talks about believing in Jesus, John uses the preposition ace, into, believing into Jesus. But we don't typically translate it that way because it wouldn't make sense in English. So we translate it believing in Jesus instead of into. So these have way more meanings. As a matter of fact, let me read you a fun little thing, or you can read along with me. I used this in a sermon a couple of years ago. Just to give you an idea in English, how many different ways a preposition can be used. It's on page 10.3. And you might have fun reading this to somebody. On the bottom of page 10.2, it says, we've got a 2-letter word we use constantly that may have more meanings than any other. The word is up. It is easy to understand up meaning toward the sky or toward the top of the list. But when we waken, why do we wake up? At a meeting, why does a topic come up? Why do participants speak up? And why are officers up for election? And why is it up to the secretary to write up a report? Often the little word isn't needed, but we use it anyway. We brighten up a room, light up a cigar, polish up the silver, lock up the house, and fix up the old car. At other times it has special meanings. People stir up trouble, line up for tickets, work up an appetite, think up excuses, get tied up in traffic. To be dressed is one thing, but to be dressed up is special. It may be confusing, but a drain must be opened up because it is stopped up. We store up in the morning, and we open up a store in the morning and close it up at night. We seem to be mixed up about up. To be up on the proper use of up, look up in a word, look up the word in a dictionary. In one desk-sized dictionary, up takes up half a page, and the listed definitions add up to about 40. If you're up to it, you might try building up a list of the many ways which up is used. It will take up a lot of your time, but if you don't give up, you may wind up with 1,000. And that, I mean, we don't think about that. You know, I remember saying to somebody, when I read this, I thought, okay, did you know you can sit up and sit down at the same time? You know, it's normal for us, and so there will be different ways of using these prepositions that were normal for the Greeks, just like up is normal for us to use it in all those different ways. So context will tell you how it's going to be used. So, for instance, the word N, in the middle of that little box, that cube, epsilon nu, can be translated in, with, or by. And boy, those seem like really different words to us, because by seems like alongside. How could that be in and by? And again, context will tell you. Other times it's very difficult. So those are the prepositions, verbs, adverbs, and conjunctions. One of the things that the Greeks like to do, sort of like in that illustration, it says sometimes up can add a special meaning, like brighten up a room, dress up instead of just dress. The Greeks like to add a preposition to the front of words. And sometimes it's just a heightened form of the word. So, for instance, anastasis is the word for resurrection. So there you go, Anastasia. It's the name that comes from the word for resurrection. In Philippians chapter 3, the Apostle Paul talks about the resurrection. I've not yet attained to the resurrection from the dead. You remember reading that, Philippians 3? That word is ek anastasis. So they add the preposition. It's the only place in the New Testament that it might be used one other place now that I think about it. But how do you translate that different? Because it doesn't mean resurrected out from, because ek means from. So what it does is just adds a heightened form to the word. Another one is gnosis, spelled, there's a silent letter, gnosis. Gnosis is where, we put the in front of that, agnostic, not knowing. So gnosis, Paul uses it many times, and he puts that preposition epi in front of it. Epi, what does it say here as a meaning for epi? It's right on top of the cube. Epi, upon. So he'll use epignosis. And it's just a heightened form of the word. It's not your run-of-the-mill knowledge. This is a heightened knowledge. At least that's the way that Paul uses it. And yet you'll find some commentaries that say there's no difference between epignosis and gnosis. So you have to look in the context. So anyway, so they like to add those. So you can't just take, it's kind of like butterfly. You can't take the parts of a word and say, well, I know what butter is and I know what fly is, so now I know what butterfly is. You can't just take parts of a word and find out what the meaning is from that. You have to see how it's used. That's how you determine words, meanings of words. So let's look at we'll stop with that. Let's look at your worksheets that you did and see if you have any questions. And then we'll look at the worksheet you've done. And most of it will have nothing to do with what we're talking about, but it will have most to do about what we talked about last week.
It took me to realize that some of these weren't just a single sound or single letter.
Like what?
The,
Fee.
yeah, the TH, the
Oh, yes.
TS.
Yes. Oh, they don't
I
translate to a
can't, I
single
just
letter.
no word, what?
Yeah.
It took a while.
So let's just go through them. You want to read them off what you have? Somebody, A, B, C, D, on the first, number one.
Got drama,
Okay, drama,
stigma,
stigma,
atlas. Is that right?
yeah,
Thesis?
yeah. Somebody do the next column.
Asbestos, pneumonia, panorama, emphasis.
Very good. Somebody do the next column.
Genesis, diagnosis, diploma, anathema.
Great. Those are all Greek words. That's pretty amazing. So, so it just shows you how many borrowed words we have in English from Greek. Okay, these are not Greek words. Somebody do the first column there.
Tide, slate, foil, mount, dew, music.
Okay, so you said, what'd you say for D?
What was C?
I got mount for D.
Okay, that's
Mound.
mound.
Mound,
Yeah,
Yeah.
I got mound.
mound.
And what did you have
See that
for
now.
C?
Mound for C, foil.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
So do could be either D-E-W or D-O. I suppose.
Right.
Okay, next column. Somebody?
Sweet,
Sweet.
Go ahead.
immune, broom,
I had trouble with that one.
Broom?
Yeah. So the OU goes to,
The Omicron Upsilon?
okay.
Yes. Ooh.
Ooh.
Okay,
Yeah, there is no Omicron in Greek.
yeah,
So,
yeah, I and J, I wasn't sure.
and then few,
Uh-huh,
fruit, and growth.
yep. So the suite could be S-U-I-T-E or S-W-E-E-T,
Yeah.
either one.
And do could be 3 words over on E.
I had D-E-W, D-O.
D-U-E, D-E-W.
Oh, do, like D-U-E, yeah. Very good. Okay, Dave, you want to do the third column there?
I have gropes, beds, lax,
What did you say?
lax for O.
Yeah, somebody have something different?
Locks.
I had
Locks.
locks.
Yeah. Ah as in father? Yeah, locks, L-O-C-K-S.
He, I have raids,
And that would be rods.
Rods.
R-O-D-S.
What is it?
R-O-D-S,
Yeah, rods, like fishing rods.
yep.
ah,
Because I
rods.
mean, you know, you look at that alpha and you want to say a sound, but it's an ah sound. And the last two?
Decks,
Decks and drops.
Drops. Yep.
Can I ask a question before we turn the page?
Yes.
On the number 1, D, that came out to thesis.
Uh-huh.
So I got thesis out of that too,
Yeah,
but I actually think it should be thesis.
yeah. Yeah,
Because if it was gonna be the E sound, it should be the
right.
eta.
Yeah, right. But it is a Greek word. And we get thesis from that. That's
From what they would say thesis. Okay.
Okay, so the 4 punctuation marks are pretty simple. You got those, right?
Is what we use as a colon, is that an apostrophe or just a dot, a high dot?
It would be just like the high dot of a colon.
Yeah, so it's not an apostrophe, it's not the apostrophe character, it's just a dot.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You can't find that on my English keyboard, so. I don't know. Yeah. Comma, semicolon, or colon, and a question mark. Okay, one more. This will use some more diphthongs. Somebody want to do the first column?
How, end, house, hay.
Yep.
What were the first 2?
How,
How and end?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't
Okay.
speak up well.
Yeah, so we got some breathing marks in here too. So that adds a little bit of.
How do you, if you're spelling, how do you indicate breathing marks? Or spelling out loud?
Oh, if you're
If
spelling.
you're trying to spell a word,
Yeah, I never thought of that.
you don't, there's no way to do it.
No.
You would assume the person on the other end would know what to put in there.
Well, if it would be pronounced to you and then you would spell it, is that what you're?
Are there words in Greek that have a different meaning but the same characters based on breathing marks?
Yes.
So how would you spell those 2 words out loud? You couldn't? Or
Well,
you-
the one that I'm thinking of is just the single omicron. If it has a smooth breather, it's a pronoun. If it has a
It's
rough
either
breather,
ha or ah,
yeah.
so you can't, but you can't indicate which it is.
I don't know why.
Okay.
So second column.
8, hate, hate, hen.
Got 3, 8, hate, and hen. Yeah, very good.
I thought the hate was interesting. They're both,
Yeah, and that's what you were talking about, Lisa, the same sound for the diphthong.
Right.
Yeah. And one last one. Somebody else. Linda, you got it?
I didn't. This
Okay.
whole section left me a little confused.
Oh, do you have a question?
I was getting answered. There you
Okay.
go.
Dave, you want to do that?
I have hides,
Hides?
yes.
Yeah.
Hopes, hops,
Yep. Hikes, Hikes. So just look across the page here, and you'll see an entire story.
Okay, which page are you on?
This is 2-1, it's the back of
Okay,
the
that's
book.
2-1, okay.
Oh, you mean the next lesson?
The next worksheet.
Oh, the next worksheet, okay.
Purpose of this assignment is to help the student form words by using Greek letters and to check himself to see if he's able to do it. The goal is to be able to pronounce Greek words easily. So this is a story, obviously from the 70s. You'll see it has a famous person from the 70s. It has some let me see, look at the line, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The fifth line from the bottom on the first page. And it starts with iota, omicron, upsilon. You see that? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
How would you pronounce that? E-U. U. 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 Yeah, like Y-O-U. Okay? Are you looking at me like,
I have to look at your lips in order to hear what you're saying.
oh my, I'm so
So
sorry.
if I look down at the page, I lose it.
Oh my.
So that's why I'm
You.
staring at you.
You, okay? You're not gonna get much out of my lips because it's 3 vowels.
Right.
You, and the next word would be
Could?
could. You could. Next word?
Sell.
Sell. The next word? The zeta has a
I
DZ.
don't have the command of the characters and sounds
Yeah.
to do this.
The zeta has a DZ sound,
Mhm.
so it
Ads.
ads. You could sell ads
Two.
to make some.
bread.
That's the line from the 70s, okay? You could
Okay.
sell ad to make some bread. So, anyway, so at the end of this story, then there's 7 questions about, see what your comprehension was of the story. And,
Oh, good, it's in English. The questions,
yes,
that helps.
and in number 7, it says what Greek word was used in this story.
So it has absolutely nothing to do with what he was trying to do in lesson 2.
No, it's just review. It's just review of practicing this. Now, there is some here, this last part of the worksheet.
This is the pronouns memorization.
And so it's parts of speech.
Yeah.
No, it's not, this is not memorization. He's gonna tell you to turn to page 6-2, which has some of the text from 2 Peter. And he's gonna tell you to look at a verse that has 5 words in it. And you're gonna write those 5 words down, or 6 words on the next page, just like he gave you the example at the bottom of this page. So he gave you an example on the bottom of page 2-3, and on page 2-4, you're going to do the same thing with the 6 words that are in 2 Peter.
Okay, so you put them where they belong as to what part of speech they are.
Yep.
Did this guy self-publish this or something?
There was no
As
such
somebody
thing
who
in the
does book
70s.
layout,
There's no
this
such
looks
thing.
like a paste up job.
That was my
Yeah, it was
first
com-
impression.
it was
When I bought the book, I was like, oh, this is lame.
This was a
lame.
low-budget production.
This was
Before
put out,
there were, he did not even have a Wang word processor.
There was no such thing in the 70s.
This was published in '76. So, and it was published by Malone Press, which wasn't near as sophisticated as it was when they moved to Sisters, so.
Yeah, only law firms and a few others could afford word processors in the 70s.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, the 286 chip didn't come out until '82.
I was at Intel when we introduced the 8080, and that wasn't until 79.
Yeah.
So the IBM PC didn't come out until 80.
Yeah.
So, no, it's just this, I look at this, here's yet another font.
Really?
So,
Oh,
it may be similar and then just smaller
where, oh,
to the one that's in,
Oh, in
on
the-
6.2,
in the box?
on page 6.2.
Oh, yes, that's just photocopied, I think.
This,
Yeah, he's just lifted things from other books.
yeah, and pasted it
Right.
up.
Yeah, 6.2. I remember looking at that.
Actually, I guess that was a crude Greek interlinear back then.
Yeah, that is an interlinear. I think I may have that one. I had a, when I was living in Hawaii, my wife and I were dorm parents.
So the reason I ask is I don't really understand his as somebody who's tried to study the art of learning. I don't know, he's jumping us into how the sentences and words fit together before we know enough words to do anything. And this lesson, to an engineer who took all constitutional law to get all that stuff, rather than English literature, today's lesson was meaningless.
Was it?
Yeah, I mean, I know what an adjective, I know what the pieces of the sentence is, I know what a preposition is, but when you start talking about participles and substantive and
It's Greek to you,
substantive,
right?
it's not, it's worse than Greek, it doesn't mean anything.
Okay, but a
Because-
substantive is a noun.
I had to learn it studying other languages, but that was 50 years ago.
Yeah.
So, or started 50 years ago.
So you get to learn it again.
Maybe.
So, but when we get a little further along, then we'll be using that, we'll be looking up words, and then we'll turn back to these pages and refer to them, okay?
Okay.
And I
I will probably wait till then to learn it, because right now it has no context.
right, but work on the article. So that's all I'm telling you. Keep working on the alphabet,
Right.
pronouncing it, writing it.
Would
Hopefully
that
that
help
will
at all?
be-
That was one I found online. Is it of any help to you?
What is that, a pronunciation guide?
No, yeah, but it's just another
Another font?
example of one. There were so many of them. I've
Yeah,
got
I
a
just
picture
went to Greek font and looked up images, and that's where I found that one, you know, so.
I need to black out the uppercase so I don't have to look at it.
Yeah,
I'm taking your advice, which you said, ignore the uppercase for now.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, if you can get the lowercase down. Yeah, I can remember when I was learning that, going, I don't know what those letters mean, but I had the lowercase down. So, let's see, I don't think there's anything else I can tell you about that story. I think, I was just reviewing it. Number 6, he wants you to match the names of 5 people to things. And I could only find matches for 4 of them. So I don't know if that was a trick that he was doing.
Where are you?
Page 2-3, worksheet 2-3. There's multiple choice question there, matching question on number 6. Anyway, I only found Stephanie
Oh,
Ruth.
this is after you've translated
Yeah.
the story.
Yeah, the comprehension.
Which one didn't you find?
I didn't find Judy in the story.
So
I don't
he's
even know.
just telling us that to challenge us to find it.
Exactly,
He knows it's there.
I marked it to accept the challenge.
I don't even know how you would say Judy in Greek because there's no J sound.
Oh.
I mean, in John is pronounced Ioane,
Yeah.
yeah, so, or Jesus, you know, it's
Right.
Jesus, so. Anyway, well, you guys, thank you for coming, and I hope you're encouraged. Thank you for volunteering to do some help.
Yeah, I'll do something. It looks like, tell me your first name?
Linda,
Linda had a,
I just
Guide
copied
that she
it off.
found, yeah.
I just,
no, that's okay, go ahead. You use it and I feel challenged myself. I think it'll be a learning experience to come up with a new chart with better characters.